In the heart of medieval Germany, nestled among dense forests and misty hills, there lived a young poet named Tannhäuser. Known for his brilliant mind and restless spirit, he wandered from village to village, his songs and verses capturing both joy and sorrow. His fame had spread far and wide, not just for his art, but for the way his heart seemed to ache for something unseen, something beyond the world around him. Yet despite all his admirers and accolades, Tannhäuser carried a loneliness that not even his most beautiful poetry could soothe. His heart longed for an ideal, a love that could elevate him beyond the ordinary, a connection that could silence the emptiness inside. In quiet moments, he would stand at the edge of the forest, gazing at the horizon as though hoping it would reveal a secret meant only for him. It was on one of these restless walks that he first encountered Elisabeth. She was unlike anyone Tannhäuser had ever seen. Her presence was gentle, almost ethereal, and yet she exuded a quiet strength that drew people to her naturally. Elisabeth's eyes reflected warmth and wisdom, and her smile carried the calm of someone who had faced sorrow and emerged tender but resilient. She tended to the sick in the village and helped the poor with humility, never expecting recognition or praise. From the first moment their eyes met, Tannhäuser felt a tug at his soul he could not explain. There was an innocence and purity in Elisabeth that seemed to shine like a light through the shadows that had haunted him all his life. For the first time, he felt that perhaps this longing inside him could be fulfilled, that perhaps he could find a love that was both earthly and divine. But fate, as it often does in the tales of poets and dreamers, had other plans. One evening, while wandering deeper into the forest than he had ever dared, Tannhäuser stumbled upon a glimmering grotto bathed in an unnatural light. The air was warm, fragrant, and alive with a sense of enchantment. In the center, reclining upon a bed of velvet moss, was a woman whose beauty seemed too perfect, too otherworldly to belong to this world. Her eyes shimmered with mischief and mystery, and her laughter rang like silver bells through the cavern. She was Venus, the goddess of love and desire, and she had been waiting for him. Venus spoke with a voice that was both intoxicating and soothing, offering Tannhäuser pleasures he had never known. She promised a world where sorrow and longing could vanish, where every desire could be fulfilled without consequence. Her words dripped with temptation, pulling at the corners of his soul, awakening desires he had never dared to name. Tannhäuser, caught between awe and fear, felt his heart waver. The warmth of her presence called to the restless part of him that had always sought more than the world offered. Yet even amidst the beauty and splendor of Venus's domain, his thoughts returned to Elisabeth. He remembered her gentle smile, the kindness she extended to strangers, the quiet courage in her eyes. He realized with a pang that the goddess's love, for all its brilliance, could not offer the depth, the quiet fulfillment that Elisabeth embodied. His heart, though tempted, knew what it truly sought. Days passed in the grotto, each one a struggle between desire and conscience. Venus's laughter would echo in his mind even after he had left, but thoughts of Elisabeth were constant, grounding him in a way that no enchantment could. The conflict tore at Tannhäuser, leaving him restless, sleepless, and haunted. His poetry, which had always been rich with longing, now carried a new tension, the pull of two worlds, one of earthly desire and one of transcendent, enduring love. When he finally returned to the village, his appearance had changed. His eyes held a new intensity, his voice carried the weight of experiences beyond mortal reckoning. Elisabeth noticed immediately. She had been tending to the sick as always, her hands gentle, her face serene, but she saw in him a storm that could not be ignored. Tannhäuser tried to speak, but words failed him. How could he explain the unimaginable? How could he convey the seduction of a goddess, the emptiness he felt in her absence, and the steadfast love he realized he carried for her? Elisabeth, sensing the turmoil in his soul, took his hand. Her touch was grounding, calming, and yet it awakened something fierce and tender within him. "You do not need to speak," she said softly. "I can feel your heart, Tannhäuser, and it seeks more than mere pleasure. It seeks truth." Her words struck him like lightning. In that instant he understood that the love he sought was not fleeting or shallow. It was not a fire to burn bright and vanish. It was a light that could guide him through darkness, a steadfast warmth that could endure sorrow, temptation, and the trials of life. Elisabeth embodied that love. And for the first time, Tannhäuser realized that the greatest struggle would not be between his desires and his conscience, but between the fleeting allure of temptation and the enduring call of the heart. The night fell over the village, quiet and calm, and Tannhäuser walked with Elisabeth under the stars. Each step was heavy with longing and revelation, yet light with hope. He had glimpsed the world of gods, and he had returned. But the journey had changed him. The question now was not whether he could resist Venus, but whether he could find the courage to claim the love that was waiting for him in the mortal world, with Elisabeth and nowhere else. And so, under the silver glow of the moon, a poet's heart began to stir with a love that promised both joy and suffering, a love that demanded courage, and a love that could transcend even the most enchanting of temptations. The days after Tannhäuser's return from Venus's grotto were filled with a restless quiet. Though the forest no longer glowed with unnatural light, the memory of it lingered in his mind like a shadow he could neither escape nor fully embrace. Every sight, every sound reminded him of the choices he had faced, the pull of temptation, the comfort of Elisabeth's steady love, and the knowledge that his heart could not belong fully to both worlds. He walked through the village streets, his gaze distant, his thoughts tangled with guilt and longing. Villagers greeted him warmly, but he barely noticed them. Even the music of children playing, the smell of fresh bread from the baker's shop, and the laughter of neighbors could not pierce the fog of his mind. He felt as though he had returned from a dream, but one that had left its mark, permanent and haunting. Elisabeth, sensing his unease, waited patiently at the small chapel at the village's edge. She had tended to the sick and weary as always, but her heart carried a quiet worry. When she saw him approaching, she felt a rush of relief mixed with the subtle recognition that he had been changed. Tannhäuser's eyes met hers, and in that gaze lay both longing and shame. He could not hide the weight he bore, nor could he pretend the experience in Venus's realm had not left an imprint on his soul. "Elisabeth," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I have seen things I cannot explain. I have wandered where no mortal man should go, and yet even there my heart returned to you." Her hand reached for his, firm but gentle, grounding him. "You do not need to explain, Tannhäuser. The heart knows its own truth, even when the mind falters. I can see the struggle you carry, and I know the choice is never easy. But love, true love, requires courage, and you have it within you." Even as her words offered comfort, Tannhäuser felt the pull of guilt gnawing at him. How could he reconcile the splendor and seduction of Venus with the purity and steadfastness of Elisabeth? He feared that speaking too freely of his experience might taint the love he longed for.
yet silence threatened to suffocate him with its weight. Days turned into weeks, and Tannhäuser found himself wandering the hills and forests again, seeking solace in nature's calm. The trees whispered in the wind, the streams glimmered under the sunlight, and the birds sang without care, but his heart remained restless. He carried with him the memory of Venus, a tantalizing, otherworldly presence, and the knowledge that the mortal love of Elisabeth demanded patience, humility, and sacrifice. One evening, Tannhäuser climbed to a ridge overlooking the village. The sky was streaked with orange and violet, the horizon stretching endlessly. He thought of Venus, of the warmth and pleasure he had known in her presence, and yet, in the same breath, he thought of Elisabeth, the gentle smile, the soft voice, the unwavering kindness. How could he reconcile these two truths within himself? How could a heart hold both desire and devotion and yet remain unbroken? It was then that he realized the conflict itself was a test. Venus represented the fleeting, the worldly, the immediate gratification that could dazzle the senses but never satisfy the soul. Elisabeth represented something deeper, steadfastness, patience, and love that endured suffering and temptation. He understood with a quiet clarity that took his breath away, that the heart must choose its path. True love required courage not only to embrace joy, but also to resist distraction, to endure absence, and to remain faithful to what was eternal. Returning to the village that night, Tannhäuser found Elisabeth waiting by the chapel again. Her eyes met his, and in them she saw both forgiveness and understanding. "You have returned to the right place, Tannhäuser," she said softly, her voice carrying the warmth of countless small acts of kindness. "The heart that seeks truth will always find its home." He knelt before her, overwhelmed with emotion. "Elisabeth, I cannot speak fully of what I have experienced, but I swear my heart belongs to you. Not fleeting desire, not temptation, not even the allure of a goddess, only you." Tears glimmered in Elisabeth's eyes. "Then your heart is true," she whispered, "and that is all that matters. True love is not without struggle, Tannhäuser. It is tested by desire, by absence, by temptation, but in the end, it endures." The weeks that followed were a period of quiet reconciliation. Tannhäuser poured his emotions into his poetry, writing verses that spoke of longing, guilt, temptation, and the redemptive power of steadfast love. Villagers listened in awe, moved not only by the beauty of his words, but also by the depth of emotion that he expressed. And throughout it all, Elisabeth remained by his side, offering gentle support, quiet wisdom, and unwavering presence. Yet even in these moments of peace, the shadow of Venus lingered. Tannhäuser knew that he would never fully forget her, that the memory of her beauty and her power would occasionally stir desire within him. But he also knew that such moments were fleeting illusions, and that the love he sought, the love that could endure, that could bring fulfillment to the soul, lay with Elisabeth.
As spring arrived in the village, life seemed to awaken from its winter slumber. Blossoms colored the hillsides, rivers sparkled under the sun, and the air carried a sense of renewal. Yet for Tannhäuser, no beauty of nature could fully erase the inner turmoil he carried. The memory of Venus, of her intoxicating power and the temptations she had offered, haunted him like a shadow that could not be banished. He tried to bury the past, immersing himself in poetry and village life,
But the knowledge of what he had experienced in Venus's realm demanded a reckoning. He knew that a love like Elisabeth's could not coexist with the secrets and desires he still carried. A part of him feared that confessing might ruin what he had found, but another part recognized that truth was the only path to redemption. One day, during a gathering at the chapel, villagers spoke of indulgence, sin, and the trials of the human heart. Rumors had begun to circulate of Tannhäuser's disappearance into the forest, of strange sightings of him wandering alone, and whispers of encounters beyond the mortal world. Some voices were judgmental, others filled with curiosity, but all stirred a growing unease in the poet. He felt as though the weight of unseen eyes pressed upon him, questioning the integrity of his soul. Elisabeth sensed the growing storm around him. She took his hand in private one evening, her eyes steady, filled with quiet strength. "Tannhäuser," she said softly, "the world may misunderstand, but your heart knows its truth. It is not the gossip of others that defines you, but the choices you make and the love you hold." Her words, though gentle, were like a beacon. Tannhäuser realized he could no longer avoid the confrontation with both himself and the world. He needed to act, to voice the truth of his journey, and to show that his love for Elisabeth was unwavering even in the face of judgment. The next morning, with the village gathered in the central square, Tannhäuser stepped forward. His voice, though trembling at first, carried the weight of honesty. "I have wandered where few men have dared. I have seen temptations beyond mortal understanding, and I have faltered. But in all that I have experienced, one truth has remained. My heart belongs to Elisabeth, not to fleeting pleasures, not to illusions of desire, but to the love that endures, to the love that asks for courage, patience, and fidelity." A hush fell over the crowd. Some faces showed astonishment, others disbelief, and a few, those who had known his heart, smiled with quiet understanding. Tannhäuser's confession was more than a declaration of love. It was a testament to the struggle between mortal temptation and the soul's pursuit of what is eternal. Even as he spoke, he could feel the lingering presence of Venus, as though the goddess herself observed from some distant, unseen realm. The memory of her beauty, her laughter, and her promises pressed against his mind. Yet he did not waver. Elisabeth's hand found his again, grounding him, reminding him of what truly mattered. Her quiet strength became a shield against the pull of his former desires. Once he finished speaking, Elisabeth stepped forward, her voice steady and warm. "Tannhäuser has returned to the right path," she said. "He has faced temptation, acknowledged it, and chosen what is enduring. Love is never without trial, but it is the courage to remain true that makes it sacred." The villagers murmured among themselves, and gradually the atmosphere shifted. Curiosity and judgment gave way to admiration. They recognized that Tannhäuser's journey was not one of sin, but of a human heart seeking truth in a world of temptations. His honesty, his vulnerability, and his love for Elisabeth became a lesson to all who listened, that the soul's desires must be guided by conscience, and that true love requires both courage and devotion. In the days that followed, Tannhäuser's poetry became even more profound. His verses, inspired by the trials he had endured, spoke of longing, redemption, and the triumph of steadfast love over fleeting desire. People traveled from distant villages to hear him recite, and his words carried not only beauty, but a depth that touched the hearts of all who listened. Through it all, Elisabeth remained by his side. She understood that love was not simply a matter of shared joy, but also of enduring hardships together. In her presence, Tannhäuser found the peace that had eluded him in the forest and in the grotto of Venus. Her love was not flashy or overwhelming. It was quiet, steady, and unwavering, the kind of love that could heal wounds, soothe anxieties, and strengthen the soul. Yet, even in this period of reconciliation, Tannhäuser knew that the struggle between desire and devotion would never fully disappear. Venus's memory lingered, a reminder of the fragility of the human heart. But unlike before, the memory no longer held power over him. It was a shadow against which the light of Elisabeth's love shone all the brighter. He had faced the seduction of earthly pleasure and emerged with his soul intact, guided by a love that transcended temptation. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the village, Tannhäuser and Elisabeth walked together along the riverbank. The air was fragrant with blossoms, and the water reflected the colors of the fading sky. Tannhäuser took Elisabeth's hands in his, feeling the steady warmth that had become his anchor. "Elisabeth, I have known temptation and fear, doubt and longing, but through it all I have learned what love truly is, and I promise, as long as I live, my heart will remain yours alone." Elisabeth smiled, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "Then your heart is free, Tannhäuser, and nothing in this world, not even the pull of gods or the whispers of the wind, can change that. Our love is strong enough to endure all trials." As they stood together, watching the river flow beneath the setting sun, Tannhäuser felt a sense of serenity, unlike anything he had known. The trials were not over, but he had chosen his path, and for the first time he realized that love was not simply a feeling, but a commitment, a courage, and a light that could guide him through the darkest of nights. And so, under the quiet glow of twilight, two hearts bound by enduring love prepared to face whatever the future might bring, strengthened by the trials of the past and the unwavering promise of devotion.
Winter's first frost had settled over the village, turning the hills and forests into a sparkling sea of white. The air was crisp, and the quiet of the season brought reflection and stillness. For Tannhäuser and Elisabeth, this winter marked a new chapter, not one of temptation or struggle, but of hope, devotion, and the calm certainty of love earned through trials. Though the memories of Venus lingered faintly in Tannhäuser's mind, they no longer held the power to disturb his heart. He had faced desire, confronted guilt, and spoken his truth before the world. What remained was the love he had chosen, the pure, steadfast, enduring love of Elisabeth, and with her he found a peace that had once seemed impossible. Days passed in quiet harmony. Tannhäuser continued to compose poetry, weaving into his verses the lessons of his journey. His words spoke not only of longing and temptation, but also of forgiveness, resilience, and the transformative power of love. Villagers marveled at the depth of emotion in his songs, feeling in them both sorrow and joy, fear and hope, and Elisabeth, always beside him, inspired his heart with her quiet strength and unwavering presence. Yet one evening, as the couple walked through the snowy forest, Tannhäuser paused. His eyes, thoughtful and intense, gazed at the frost-laden branches. "Elisabeth," he said softly, "I have walked through shadows that tested the very core of my soul. I have known temptation that could have led me astray forever, and I have learned that love is not simply a matter of feeling, but a matter of courage and choice. Through all of it, you have been my anchor." Elisabeth smiled, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "And you have shown me the same, Tannhäuser. Love is never without trials, but it is the strength to endure them together that makes it eternal. We have chosen each other, and in that choice, we have found our truth." The next morning, the village awoke to an unusual sight. News spread quickly that Tannhäuser planned to make a pilgrimage, a journey to seek forgiveness and blessing for the heart he had once nearly lost to temptation. His resolve was clear. He would go to the holy city, humbly ask for absolution, and return to Elisabeth strengthened in both spirit and love. The villagers gathered to see him off,
their faces a mixture of admiration, respect, and concern. Some whispered prayers, others offered blessings, but all recognized that the poet's path was not only one of earthly love, but also of spiritual redemption. Elisabeth stood among them, her hands folded, her eyes steady. She did not fear his journey. She understood it. She knew that the trials Tannhäuser faced were part of the path that would make their love even stronger. As Tannhäuser departed, he felt the cold wind against his face and the vastness of the world around him. Yet in his heart burned a warmth brighter than any temptation he had ever known, the certainty of Elisabeth's love. The journey was long, arduous, and filled with challenges, but every step reminded him of the choice he had made and of the life of devotion waiting for him at home. Weeks turned into months, and Tannhäuser finally returned to the village. He had been through winter storms, harsh terrain, and days of solitude, but his spirit was unbroken. His pilgrimage had been not only an act of penance, but also a reaffirmation of the love he shared with Elisabeth. He had faced fear and humility, and he had emerged with a heart purified, ready to embrace the life he had longed for all along. When Elisabeth saw him approaching, she ran to meet him, her arms open, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "Tannhäuser," she whispered, "you have returned. My heart has waited for you, and now we are together as we were meant to be." Tannhäuser took her hands in his own eyes glistening. "Elisabeth, every trial, every temptation, every moment of doubt has led me back to you. You are my truth, my light, and my eternal home. No shadow, no desire, no power can ever change that." In the warmth of Elisabeth's embrace, Tannhäuser felt a serenity that had eluded him for so long. The trials he had endured, the seduction of Venus, the weight of guilt, the fear of judgment were behind him. What remained was love in its purest form, enduring, patient, and profound. The villagers celebrated their return together. Tannhäuser and Elisabeth's story became a legend, told and retold for generations, not as a tale of sin or desire, but as a story of love that triumphed over temptation, that endured trials, and that was rooted in courage, honesty, and devotion. In the evenings, the couple would walk by the river, hand in hand, speaking softly, laughing quietly, or simply enjoying the serene beauty of the world around them. Tannhäuser's poetry continued to flourish, inspired by the love he had chosen and the lessons he had learned. Elisabeth, always his muse, smiled gently, content in the knowledge that their hearts had weathered storms and had emerged unbroken. And so their lives unfolded in quiet harmony. Love, tested by trials both earthly and divine, had become a guiding light. Tannhäuser had faced temptation. Elisabeth had waited with unwavering faith, and together they had discovered that true love is not fleeting, not fragile, but enduring, eternal in its strength, its compassion, and its devotion. The poet and his beloved lived out their days in the village, a symbol of hope and faith for all who witnessed their story. And though the memory of Venus remained, it no longer haunted Tannhäuser. Instead, it served as a reminder of the choices that shape the heart, and of the power of love that, when chosen rightly, can overcome even the most dazzling of temptations. Under the soft glow of the setting sun, with the snow melting into the flowing river and the gentle breeze rustling through the trees, Tannhäuser and Elisabeth walked together, hearts bound in an unbreakable bond. And in that quiet, enduring love, they found everything they had ever longed for, a love that was pure, true, and eternal.